So, Walk on the Wild Side and our not exactly our critique of it, but our discussion around the movie.
So we watched Walk on the Wild Side, which was directed by Edward Dmytryk, who I talked about last time because I've enjoyed a weird number of his films for someone who doesn't really seem to get talked about very much. Murder My Sweet, The Young Lions, and The Sniper. And now Walk on the Wild Side was leaving Criterion, so we checked it out.
It is not a part of your I enjoyed list, though, I don't think.
No. I would have you watch The Young Lions, which is like kind of interesting because it's got Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift, and there's one of them. It's about the war and Nazis, and it's just interesting. I thought I haven't seen it since I was literally a teenager. Anyway. But we were watching Walk on the Wild Side for that reason. And as we were watching it, we were looking at the Wikipedia article and discovering that Edward Dmytryk himself was like, this is a mess, I'm out, which was not very auspicious. And the movie itself was kind of less than the sum of its parts. It had Jane Fonda in it. It had Barbara Stanwyck in it. It had other people in it. And
Baxter.
And Baxter, who to us is most famous for
All About
Eve. She is Eve.
The male cast is slightly less well known, I think, in that movie. But
yeah, although I'm kind of curious. But to get to the point of what happened is Anne Baxter is playing a Mexican lady, and Anne Baxter. Is not Mexican, but it was also just rubbing me this weird way that Jane Fonda, who is, a little bit Hollywood.
She's Hollywood royalty at that point,
Yeah.
Daughter of not Peter Fonda. Peter Fonda is the brother.
Yeah, Henry.
Henry, thank you. Well, so Anne Baxter she's from Texas, but she's...
Sorry, I lost track of what I was saying. You take it from here, Theo.
Yes, she's from Texas, but she's of Mexican origin. I don't remember if there were specifics on like how she...
Her character.
Anne Baxter is not. And so there's that oddness. I mean, her accent actually...
She's playing with a thick accent. It didn't sound terrible to me. I don't know that I live in Los Angeles. I speak to, lots of
people with accents,
with accents here, but I don't know that I have a good enough ear to really say. It struck me as a little heavily leaned in at times.
Yeah, and then the lead man in the movie is I forget his name, Laurence
So his name is Laurence Harvey. That's his stage name.
Right. And his real name is something a lot more, you know this.
Let me take it from here. So we had noticed already that Anne Baxter is playing a Mexican lady with a thick accent, but also Jane Fonda is playing a poor Texan or Oklahoman somewhere in the Midwest, like orphan. I mean, she's playing a minor, but she's actually in her 20s and looks it, frankly. I mean, the movie had problems, like it looked like it was the 60s, but it was supposed to be the 30s, stuff like that, but whatever.
Yeah.
And so she's like playing a Texan Midwestern with a drawl, kind of a thing. And Laurence Harvey is also playing a Texan guy. And I'm looking him up, and he is born in Lithuania, with Jewish parents, emigrated to South Africa, and living before he moved to United Kingdom, and then eventually came to the United States. And he is playing a Texan. And I, it just struck me as just, we've talked a lot about representation and who's playing who. And I had just watched Hollywood Shuffle, which was a lot about Black people being told how to be Black by white people. For filming, for film purposes. And it just kind of struck me that, here again, it's let's talk degrees. I'm not saying that it's on par with that kind of situation, but, here we have people who aren't remotely poor Midwestern Southerners playing poor Midwestern Southerners. And it just struck me as like, I want to interrogate my own feelings on the subject, like, what is it? Because actors, I mean, the point of acting is to
not play who you are necessarily.
Right. I mean, what's the point? I mean, there's stunt casting and stuff like that, but I mean, you're not in it to play yourself.
Well, so like here's, we have, and there's not necessarily a hierarchy to things. There is and there isn't. Like, obviously,
No, right.
like when you're a white actor with blackface playing black actor, that's at the top of like, this is bad. Let's never do that again. There's lots of reasons. There's history. There's
And I even have something to say about that. We'll get to it.
So there's like that. And then there's, actors and this also basically includes yellow face, brown face, the whole thing.
Right.
Almost all of that. I mean, within that, there's probably degrees of like how it's worked historically, all bad, right? Then you have actors like Anne Baxter who, I mean, she doesn't really look Mexican. I mean, she could be Spanish. Yeah, there's, I guess there's that. And that's a kind of like, I guess, I don't know, is that brown face or what would you even call that? If you call it anything, does it get a name? Like, I don't know, but that's questionable, right? And so I was like, well, that bothers me. And I sort of mentioned that, and you'd mentioned, like, you were like, yeah, but then so is this Lithuanian man.
British, South African British man, yeah.
Playing a poor Texan man. And like, shouldn't that also be kind of objectionable? And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, you're right. It's kind of, I don't know if it's objectionable necessarily, but it is an interesting sort of interrogation of like, so like, here's my question for you, and maybe a slight interrogation. What about when it feels authentic? Because I think for a lot of critics and a lot of historians, not necessarily you, but I know that comes into play where it's like, well, this rich actress who came from somewhere played this really poor character really well, and so the authenticity of the role and how well it represented the community makes it okay. But does it? Is that a part of your estimation? I don't have great thoughts on this, but what is your thought?
Well, I think the problem is we have a long history of Hollywoodization of things, wherein like homeless people in general never look like real homeless people. They look like really attractive Hollywood types who got a little bit of dirt on them, and there's like the whole thing where, how actresses have played like homely girls. There's air quotes there, but like, they put glasses on, or stuff like that. And suddenly we're supposed to take them as unattractive when, all the way to like Janine Garofalo, who's quite attractive, like acting like she's the ugliest woman on earth and Truth About Cats and Dogs. I think, but what I wanted to say, I get what you're saying, but to me, it actually came down to like, I want to say I didn't find it problematic and objectionable, but it was my spider senses were tingling. And what I came to was that at that time in Hollywood, there was homogenization of anything they could homogenize.
Right, I remember this now, yeah.
So that there were people of different backgrounds in Hollywood. Rita Hayworth, her given name is
Wikipedia.
Margarita Carmen Cancino. Now her father is from Spain, but that is a very Spanish sounding name. And so they got rid of that and gave her Rita Hayworth, which sounds a little like she can play a certain time. And a lot of this was branding, now she can play someone exotic, air quotes again, but not too exotic to where white people might not enjoy it. And that was kind of the thing about, it's like Laurence Harvey's real name is Larushka Misha Skikine. That sounds wrong. It's something Lithuanian. I can't quite pronounce that last one. Skypne, maybe. So there's a weird thing where they're not even getting credit for playing.
Yeah,
for being of not American United States origin. So they're homogenized, a group of people that actually is more diverse than it appears to be.
Yeah.
Is then homogenized, and there's more to it. There's reasons people change their names and stuff like that. So this isn't like all encompassing, but definitely people's names were changed specifically so that they could work in Hollywood. And then they're playing a very narrow group of people. And this happened in the sense that gay men and lesbian women were playing straight people constantly because there's no roles for them to play anything, close to their own sexuality. And there's something about that to me, except that, you can't accept Black and Asian, who are visually just obviously not Caucasian from the United States. And they mostly omitted them. That was kind of the solution to that problem. And then you had the weird thing where like Katharine Hepburn would play an Asian woman and get a lot of credit for it rather than actually hiring an Asian woman.
Right.
Play that part. And there's something about that whole system that bothers me, to where there's nothing necessarily wrong with Laurence Harvey playing a Texan man, but there's something about the fact that we obliterated his past in order to bring him to that point. John Garfield, he was like Julius Jacob Garfinkel. I think I've gotten that slightly wrong, but I mean, that's a Jewish name and they got rid of it. Yeah. So they erased what diversity they had, and then and I'm curious what those numbers look like. Like how many, obviously Black people, anyone who looked brown or Asian or was clearly visually not white American.
Of European origin of some kind.
But like Eastern Europeans like get completely, and they could be white passing, as they say. Yeah. And they're just, turned into to white America,
Yeah,
so that's kind of what it got me thinking about a little bit. And then I thought, real quick, sorry, I know I haven't let you talk, but real quick, the other thing is, at that time, you could not go on Wikipedia and find out that Laurence Harvey's real name is, Larushka. So I wonder too, as this information, Hollywood,
Sorry, go ahead.
Hollywood, had this whole, and the studio system had a whole machine for creating these stars that went away in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And then, 80s, we don't really have Wikipedia, but the reporting on them got different. I wonder how that changed things. And I even wonder if it might have made things less diverse, because now you can find out where people really come from. Now we're going to be less diverse. I'm curious, maybe not. I'd be curious what the numbers were like as people's real origins become true. What
do we know?
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm just curious, idly curious. Okay, now I'll let you talk.
All right, yeah. So what you're talking about is like a funneling effect of culture, where if you think about the actors and actresses, Rita Hayworth, John Garfield, like they are actually from a more wide set of their background is not the sort of monoculture white that things tended to look like on screen. Mm-hmm. And so you have this funneling effect, and you're right. Anyone who visually didn't look, white enough, whatever that, really, mm-hmm. what that concept meant, didn't tend to do very well in Hollywood. You have outliers like Sidney Poitier and stuff, but it's, and I like Sidney Poitier, but there's the baggage with him too, despite, his great acting and stuff. And so you have this funneling effect, and it's also true behind the scenes. You haven't talked about it, but there's a weird racist thing that comes, I think, out of Germany, where it's like Hollywood was built by the Jews, which is just offensive and wrong. But there was a lot of Eastern European and European immigrants who were directors and screenwriters and who worked in Hollywood, like Billy Wilder, I think, was Austrian-Hungarian. Look it up for me. And Zanuck, I think. Isn't Daryl Zanuck Jewish? Jewish.
So Billy Wilder, according to Wikipedia, was born in Kingdom of Galicia and Lodomeria, which was Austrian Poland.
Poland, yeah. So you and look up Daryl Zanuck so I can remember, or David O. Selznick, I think is actually what I'm thinking of. But
David O. Selznick was definitely Jewish. I don't know what his.
Yeah, and so the people who are making these movies, and not all of them, because plenty of these people were white. Again, Hollywood is not created by the Jews, not this weird icky thing.
Yeah.
But like but even so, they're a part of this display of culture that is very much funneling into like this white monoculture. And it's interesting because I think because we want actors and actresses and I'm not sure what the non-gender term for that is, maybe just actors. We want actors to be able to play against type, against who they are. There is, and there is an issue in Hollywood today about how like nobody trans is playing trans characters, or at least that was a problem. There's more people now doing that, but it's still an issue. And you have people, not being represented by people who are part of the community, and that's an issue of representation too. But in classical Hollywood, there's even a similar issue where we're turning it into a monoculture, and like we want actors to be able to play against type. We want our Lithuanian-born man to play a poor Texan, but it is problematic because, as you said, where were the roles he could play that might have been closer to his experience? Not that he always had to play them, right? But why didn't we have them at all?
Well, it's like when people talk about like we hear people say things like, "Oh, there are no female action heroes," and it's like, well, there are. Like there were. They're not enough. But it's like it's this weird history we have to reconcile ourselves with, where it was actually more diverse than we gave it credit for, but not diverse enough.
Yeah.
But then when you get to even the sexuality issues, where it's like, what did the person who was hiding their ethnicity or sexual orientation or whatever, hiding their real selves?
Yeah.
Did they have any agency in it? Did they want people talking about it? Like, because that's a whole nother squicky mess of like, sometimes people don't want, sometimes actors and artists don't want people to know where they came from and who they want to sleep with and so on.
Yeah.
But when you go back to the 40s and 50s, it's like, was that any choice they made, or was that a concession they had to make in order to get work? It's hard to know. Yeah.
We've listened to You Must Remember This, and there's a lot in that about how like certain, especially in Star Wars, which is not about the thing you think it's about Hollywood stars during wartime era.
World War II specifically.
Yeah. And later series that cover some of these actors and actresses and what happened to them, and like how they had to get married, even though it was sort of an accepted thing behind doors. Not really accepted so much as like some people knew that like this actor was gay, or this actor was lesbian or bi or whatever, or pan or however that is. And it just, so like we've even today, we're probably going to watch Scotty's Secret History of Hollywood, or Celluloid Closet. What's it called?
I'll look that up.
Find a name, which is about some of the history of stars who were more sexually free. Now, like anything, because a lot of this history has either been destroyed or rewritten, it's a little hard to get to the truth of things. There's
Scotty
always
Scotty and the Secret History of Hollywood.
And then is it Celluloid Dream or Celluloid Closet that you want to watch?
Oh, Celluloid Closet.
Celluloid Closet. And so like it's about like some of the freer sexuality, and like because it's been rewritten or just outright destroyed, it's like it's always hard to know for sure what's true and who's just, telling a story. But it's also like there's this weird thing where it's like, I remember in the trailer for Scotty's Secret History of Hollywood, there's one of these guys says like, do you think it's your place to tell these stories? Like, it's not your place to tell these stories about these people. And Scotty's like, why wouldn't I? It's just a story about people. Like there's this standard that like, you're not supposed to talk about it, A, because it's sex, and B, because it's someone's private life. Like it's this old school puritanical thing that exists in the US where like sex is supposed to be kind of in the closet. And like, I'm kind of like the idea that like it is just a story to tell. Like it's not it's not like something to be ashamed of or to have be private. It's the reason that like people have to come out of the closet, even though that's a horrible thing. And so I think that's why a part of why I want to watch it is to open up the idea of how old Hollywood isn't as homogenous as we think it is. Still
Right.
problematic, very problematic, but not as homogeneous as it appears. Now you have Cat. Hi, Cat.
Yeah, I had to let her in. Well, yeah, no, and I agree. And I think it also, this touches on something we've talked about a few times here, which is erasure.
Yeah.
And it's interesting when there's different kinds of erasure that happen, I guess is what I'm saying. There's the not even allowing people to act. There's allowing them to act, but they're actively playing someone else in their personal life. There's all these and then there's just not remembering the people who were.
Yeah, because we watched The Watermelon Woman, and that's all about how we don't remember some of our early Black stars and how their history's been hidden up, and that is an even more, I don't know if severe is the right word, there is more even to that than there is to what we're talking about. But so here, Boots Riley made what's the movie he made called that we liked that was weird? Sorry to bother you. And a part of his thing is about how there's all this stuff with his movie is almost more about class than it is about race, though race is part of it.
Well, race is a big part of that movie, yeah.
Yeah, but it's also, but I think for him, a lot of it is about class. And in the movie, there's an idea in it about how Luna must be appeased. In the movie, there's a thing about how, I'm sorry if you're listening, but Luna on camera is just, there's cat anus and all kinds of things happening. But so in the movie, there's this thing about how it's not even real. It's not white people in white culture. There's this monolithic thing, white culture, and you and I, we're white. We belong to white culture in a way, but it's not really about that. It's white culture is this ideal or this monolithic thing that doesn't really exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what this old Hollywood was creating, and that's an issue there. And so a part of Boots Riley thing is even it's not just Black people versus white culture. There are very few people who really say that. It's about classism against white culture too, because larger white culture also has to do with affluency, right. the monolithic idea of white culture. So there's something complicated in there. I'm not even sure I've eloquated it quite right, but this early Hollywood period, this funneling into monolithic
mm-hmm.
white culture is the historical part of that.
Right, and the sin of old Hollywood, the biggest sin of old Hollywood was hardly that it didn't properly represent white culture, but
right.
that kind of even shows you forget about Black people, forget about distinguishing even Asian cultures apart from one another, forget about any of that. It was just attempting to really squeeze any interesting diversity out of any chance it could. But then I think there's a lot of interesting, and that's why we like Karina Longworth and so on. I think there are interesting stories of people who were able to. I was just thinking about William Haynes, who was with Marion Davies in who's most famous at this point for being William Randolph Hearst's longtime mistress, but they were in a movie together, and he was an early actor who lived out openly gay. And when he could no longer act, he became, I think he did, he had to quit acting, but I think he did he still worked within Hollywood, I think, as in interior design. And I don't want to proclaim who should be the heroes to groups I don't belong in, but his story is a really interesting story, and it's too bad, we don't know more about it. So it's highlighting these people that kind of got, and again, this makes me think of Be Natural and Hilda Klimt, and what was the other one? Oh, the photographer whose name I can't remember, but these women artists who we don't see much about. Anyway. Yeah.
Anyways, no, I think you're what you're talking about is interesting. It's a part of the same discussion. It's almost like it's in white people, forward. European white culture was already compressed in this funnel, and it's which just shows you how terrible, how bad it is. Yeah,
and it's moving forward, we need to be more diverse and inclusive and all these things. But I also think there's a reflection that could be had and that's what Watermelon Woman's about, is to reclaim the diversity that was lost.
Yes.
Even if while still acknowledging that it was still not good enough, that kind of thing. Anyway,
Totally.
That's my political. I mean, I hate calling it political because I think wanting our art to reflect the rich wonders of our world and the people in it is not a political thing, but that's fine.
Well, it's. I think everything is political, but I don't mean in the governmental sense. I just mean like everything is about society and culture and a lot of, anyways, whatever. But yes, it's interesting thoughts.
Okay.
So
but don't see Walk on the Wild Side because it's really not great. Barbara Stanwyck's kind of interesting in it. This cat is so unhappy. Do you want to pause a moment before we do that? And let me see if I can.
Yes.
Play.